So you know how when you travel, you always end up gaining a little bit of weight, or you just get inflamed and you hold a bunch of water weight, your face feels puffy, your abdomen feels puffy, you just don't look as good as you did when you left. It's like, okay, I'm going on vacation and now all of a sudden I look like garbage. What the heck is going on? Well, there are some really solid answers as to what's happening. It has to do with inflammation, it has to do with our gut biome, it has to do with digestion, and there's some solid ways that you can at least mitigate some of it, okay? You can at least combat some of the issues here. You're not going to be able to fully get rid of it because it's out of our control. But I have found that utilizing apple cider vinegar in specific ways helps out with this. And I figured this out over the last few years when I've been having to do a lot of travel, specifically for photo shoots or anything like that, where I have to keep conditioning. And then I realized when I was overweight, maybe this was why I was having so much trouble losing weight. I was doing so much travel when I was in the corporate world and when I was 100 pounds overweight. So anyhow, let's go ahead and let's break it all down. Please make sure you hit that red subscribe button, then hit that little bell icon to turn on notifications. And after this video, do check out Thrive Market. Thrive Market's an online grocery store that I'm affiliated with. So I've been able to create keto boxes and fasting boxes and travel boxes, all these different grocery boxes that work for people that watch my videos. That way you can get your groceries just delivered right to your doorstep. And as a matter of fact, you can get apple cider vinegar through those boxes. So what the heck, you're in the right spot. Let's go ahead and let's dive into the science. Okay, the first thing that we have to look at is our gut bacteria. So you may not know this, but our gut bacteria differs from day to night. And this has been proven in multiple studies, but in particular we found with mice studies that when mice go from day to night, they can have a 15% variance just in their overall gut bacteria. That means their gut bacteria shifts. Now, this 15% variance happens to make up 60% of their overall volume of bacteria. So what this ultimately means is that 60% of our gut bacteria can change simply from day to night. You see, here's what's wild. Our bodies have an ability to register whether it's day or night just from light. Okay, many of our human cells can recognize light and darkness, and that changes different things, diurnal rhythms, things like that. Now, the interesting thing about our gut bacteria is our gut bacteria is in the dark. Okay, so our gut bacteria isn't necessarily privy to the same experience with lightness and darkness, but it is privy to the details of what's coming in terms of food. So what that means is that if we're not eating, our gut bacteria might change and think that it's nighttime. Point is there's two compounding variables here, lightness and darkness and food and absence of food, that affects what kind of gut bacteria we have at a given point. You see, during the day, our gut bacteria's job is to grow and to help out the metabolism, to push life forward. During the evening time and nighttime when we're sleeping, its job is to repair. Okay, so it makes sense that our gut bacteria would shift to have different mechanisms. But what does this have to do with travel? Well, the thing is, travel changes our gut bacteria. And there was a study that was published in the journal Cell, took a look at a couple of people that were traveling from the USA to Israel. This is really wild. So they went across time zones, right? Well, they measured their gut bacteria before they left and then when they landed. They found after they landed and crossed time zones that their levels of Firmicutes bacteria were exceptionally higher. Now, Firmicutes bacteria is the bacteria that's associated with obesity. Okay, so they found that just by crossing time zones and by messing up their circadian rhythm for their gut bacteria, the bad bacteria that can make people gain weight elevated. After 2 weeks, those levels came back down to normal. Now, what they did is they took that Firmicutes bacteria after they landed, extracted it from the humans, and colonized it into mice. Well, guess what? The mice didn't change a single thing. They didn't change their diet. They didn't change their lifestyle. But they all gained weight just by implanting this bacteria, which proves that when we travel and we cross over specific, or not even specific, but we cross over any kind of time zones, we mess our bodies up, the gut bacteria shifts. Okay, so this explains why we might gain weight when we're on a trip, but it doesn't explain how we can solve the issue. So if we look at some stuff that Dr. Lawrence Brandt from Montefiore Medical Center in New York did, he talked about how when we travel, it's like this digestive process that occurs. It's like a balloon, okay? So if you have a balloon and you fill it with gas, and that balloon goes up into the atmosphere, the pressure from the atmosphere is going to trigger sort of the expansion of the gas inside the balloon, causing some bloating. Okay, well, imagine that happening to the human body. Okay, we have some gas in our abdomen that's naturally there, and then we go up into any kind of pressurized system, okay, where we're just still at a relative altitude of maybe 5,000 to 7,000 feet on an airplane. Okay, well, what's going to happen is that's going to trigger the expansion of gases in our gut, which means now there's more room for things to move around, and it changes the colonization of bacteria, but also changes how food ferments, which therefore can make a big difference. So what can you do with this? Well, this is where apple cider vinegar comes in. You see, one thing that we have to pay attention to is hydrochloric acid levels. When we get dehydrated or when we're traveling, perhaps our hydrochloric acid levels, which is what breaks down food in our gut, end up getting thrown out of whack. Well, and what happens when our hydrochloric acid levels get lower is it makes it so that the food that is in our system stays in one spot longer because it's not able to get digested, and it ferments. And when it ferments, we build up extra gas. So this is where apple cider vinegar, before you travel, just in the way of like 2 to 3 tablespoons before you get on a plane, can make a huge difference in supporting the hydrochloric acid levels, so perhaps you don't have this radical shift in gut bacteria. Now this solves at least the weight gain portion associated with bacteria. It's one of those things where you make a small, minuscule little movement, a little change that can have a magnificent impact. I mean, just a huge impact on your gut bacteria by doing one little thing, because you are affecting it at that very point of leverage. Now, the other thing we have to look at is the activity of pepsin. Apple cider vinegar increases the activity of pepsin, which means you're able to absorb and utilize nutrients better. Less sitting in your gut and more actually getting into your bloodstream and actually working. And then there was a study that was published in Scientific Reports that found that apple cider vinegar kills off certain bacteria. So for example, in this case, they found that it kills E. coli. Yeah, pretty powerful. So acetic acid that's in apple cider vinegar is powerful enough to kill bad bacteria. So when we're looking at the human body and the gut biome, generally speaking, bad bacteria die easier than good bacteria, which is a good problem to have, right? So if we can kill bad bacteria with acetic acid, maybe it puts us in that right shift that the good bacteria can allow us to stay in shape throughout our travel. Okay, now we have to look at the inflammation piece. Inflammation is a tough one to talk about because there's so many different moving pieces. But there are some studies that find that being in a hypoxic state or less oxygen triggers inflammation throughout the body, but specifically in the bowel. Okay, so if you're traveling, you're going to have less oxygen. Even if your plane is at 40,000 feet or 35,000 feet, the pressurized cabin is going to be anywhere between 5,000 and 10,000 feet. So you're still going to have less oxygen, which means that you're going to have an inflamed bowel. You're going to have an inflamed intestinal tract. This causes its own issues. This causes a leaky gut. This causes all kinds of different things to happen. So what happens is during that process, larger food particles can get into the bloodstream that normally wouldn't be able to get into the bloodstream. And therefore, it triggers the immune system to react on them, and that causes water retention throughout your body. It's just a natural inflammatory response. Like if you bump your elbow, bump your knee, water is going to go to the site because there's damage. If there's damage systemically at the cellular level, then imagine that. You have water retention occurring at the cellular level. So one of the ways that you can get around this is mitigating inflammation right at its core. If you know that you're going to be going through an inflammatory response, then you can do some things to help it. This is where turmeric comes into play. So what you would want to do is take a couple tablespoons of apple cider vinegar with possibly a little bit of turmeric, a little bit of black pepper so it helps the absorption, and just take a little shot of that sucker before you get on the plane. And it can help you out immensely. Some people will take an aspirin. That has an effect too, but remember, aspirin has an effect on the gut lining, so you don't want to be doing that all the time. Now let's talk really quick about apple cider vinegar as a probiotic and talking about the mother. Look, I am a huge fan of apple cider vinegar, and I tout it all the time. And I talk about the mother sometimes, but one thing we have to remember is that it is not a miracle probiotic. That's not the purpose of apple cider vinegar. In fact, there is no evidence of apple cider vinegar having any probiotic properties. Okay, what it does have is pectin, and pectin is a prebiotic fiber. So pectin has the ability to help sort of envelop waste within your gut and evacuate it. So again, balancing out that gut bacteria. But another thing, it's a prebiotic fiber. So if you already have good bacteria, it's going to help grow the existing good bacteria. Okay, so that's why it's very important that you take apple cider vinegar before you fly, okay, to help get the good bacteria up, and then again after you land to sustain that so that you're not growing the bad bacteria, if that makes sense. And last but not least, when we're looking at the piece of pectin too, pectin has the ability to help create what are called short-chain fatty acids, so butyric acid. This has a powerful effect on the gut to brain link, okay, so that enteric nervous system, that gut-brain axis. If you've ever gotten off a plane and you feel foggy and you feel fatigued, like just mentally, it's probably because you're not having a good gut-brain axis occurring at that time. We don't realize it, but it's super important. The gut plays a critical role in the brain. In fact, just a fun fact, Parkinson's disease, the leading hypothesis right now on what causes Parkinson's is that it has to do with the gut bacteria shifting, traveling up the vagus nerve and affecting the brain. Yes, literally, that is a scientific fact. The gut is affecting the brain even in a disease state. Okay, so if our gut is out of whack, it might be why we just aren't at our best mentally. I remember this from business trips. I remember this just vividly, getting off a plane, being before the plane, just being completely focused and know what I was going to say in a negotiation. Then get on the plane, get off, and it was like I got hit by a truck. I couldn't remember what I was going to do. I couldn't remember my negotiation points. It was just brutal. So that could be what's happening. And I found personally that a couple, 2 to 3 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar with the turmeric before, and then right after made a big difference. And then continuing that process 1 to 2 times per day while I was traveling. Okay, continuing it all the time, but specifically while I was traveling. So anyhow, I hope that this breaks some stuff down. I know it's a long-winded explanation for a pretty simple solution, but I have to justify what I'm talking about so you don't just take my word for it. You have to know why I'm talking about what I'm talking about. So as always, please keep it locked in here on my channel, and I'll see you in the next video.